Hey everyone, welcome to Talking Tokens, a podcast focused on interviewing the best crypto founders, market players, and up-and-coming startups that are changing the industry every single Tuesday and Thursday. I'm Jacquelyn Melinek, your award-nominated host and former senior crypto reporter turned entrepreneur, and I'm excited to be here with you all. Now, let's get into it. Today's guest is John Linden, the CEO of Mythical Games. Mythical Games is a Web3 gaming studio with games that include an NFL Rivals football game to a Nitro Nation World Tour. They also recently announced that they are doing a game with Pudgy Penguins. And so we have a lot to talk about there, and I'm super excited to have John on the show. John, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, to start off, you've been at Mythical Games for a number of years now. How did you kind of land that role, and what really brought you to this side of gaming?
Yeah, so I've been in the game industry for quite a long time. So started off PC console at Activision, one of the studio heads there in Call of Duty. Moved into mobile kind of shortly after my stint at Activision. And really, when I was at a mobile company, we were actually playing with kind of crypto. When CryptoKitties had just come out, we were actually looking at doing a game and really got interested in kind of the concept of what digital assets could be and how they kind of play through gameplay. And then we ended up getting acquired. The mobile company got acquired by Niantic that makes Pokemon Go. And it was just really, for me, it was just like, this is the time. So we were probably a little early, to be super honest, back in kind of 2018, 2019. But you really thought that this was the next step, and this is the next generation of how we unlock consumer value and how do we really affect gameplay. So we've been pretty dedicated to the cause, and I think we've seen a lot of success in the last, particularly the last year and a half. We're really starting to see things come together and see how these models work, and so we're super excited for the future.
Yeah, the last time I ran into you was actually at the Polkadot conference about a year ago. And we talked about like kind of the Web3 gaming landscape and how things were changing. But what do you think has been like the biggest factors about the evolution of Web3 gaming since you got in to even like a year ago to where we are today?
Yeah, so I think obviously in the industry, there's been quite a bit of noise. There's been a lot of things that have happened in the industry, and I think that's that deterred a little bit of kind of excitement from the consumer level. But I think we've gotten through a lot of that. I think since we talked last time, it was in Copenhagen, right? I think it was Copenhagen. And so since we talked last time, we put out a game, NFL Rivals, and I think a couple things have really stood out there. One is that we've really kind of figured out the flow of how to onboard people very seamlessly, and really not make it feel crypto-ish. It really feels like a natural extension of gameplay. And I think that's telling in a lot of our stats. One stat I'm most proud of, frankly, is when we entered the American football kind of genre here, there's been a company around for quite a long time. We had Madden out for 37 years. I think that game's been out. And we entered the space. We had a very different economy. These cards are tradable and sellable, and we, I think what's exciting about it is we actually have a higher ranking rating in the App Store than even Madden does. I think they're sitting at a 4.7 and we're sitting at a 4.8. So I feel like that's kind of a clear indication that we've been able to grow a game with now over 5 million players to do it very naturally, to make it feel like it's part of the game and it doesn't feel like a crypto project. And I think that's been very exciting. The other part we've seen too is we've just seen tremendous growth. So as we've gotten this game out, as we've got it into millions of players' hands, we've been able to kind of really optimize, what is that next feature that's really going to drive players to interact with each other, to really kind of jump into this new economy. And we've seen that happen. We've added things like crafting, right? To where you can take your digital assets and craft them into something new and burn the old ones, right? We've done things like what we call synergy, to where now your collection of assets can affect gameplay, right? So some assets can affect other assets. And as we've done those things, it's been really great for retention and engagement in the game. And we've also done things like, I think our most successful functionality right now has been around what we call quick trade. This is all new since I talked to you last time, but basically we had started testing this in another product we had called D-Market, to where not only can you kind of buy with fiat, can you buy with crypto, but now you can also trade. So you can trade assets for other digital assets. And we've been able to kind of apply kind of these fintech marketplace infrastructure to really make it seamless for players. So I want this part, I'm willing to give up these. And in reality, it's kind of a 6-person transaction behind the scenes. And again, to me, that's the perfect use of kind of using a Web3 economy to kind of transition that back to user gameplay.
So you guys got 5 million you got 5 million new people within the first year of launching it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
we're a
that's
little over.
impressive. That's
Yeah.
not common, especially in the Web3 gaming space. Do you think that is given by maybe hiding the aspects of like blockchain technology? It's not like in their face as much, or do you think it's because it's related to the NFL and people love Madden, or what is it?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. One, it is a game. So I mean, we really, it is a game first, and
Mm-hmm.
that's
That's
really really
important. Yeah.
yeah. You go into it, it feels like any other game you play, right? And I think that's what consumers want. I don't think, there is an audience, and there'll always be kind of a niche audience of kind of profiting from game assets, things like that. That's not really the focus. The focus is really extending gameplay and creating value, right? And I think one of the things that I think is most interesting, so probably one of the most valuable cards by the community is like Travis Kelce, which makes sense all over social media. All the Swifties love him,
Yeah.
but that card can sell for over $1,000, right? And what's really fascinating is the only way to get the valuable card is we don't actually sell that card, right? You have to earn it in the game. So it's the only way to unlock that card is either to earn it or to buy it from somebody that already has it. And I think what's really, really exciting about that is that card can go for a lot of money, and we don't see a rush of people going to sell them, right? With the attitude of the consumer, and I think this is important. We've seen this in other video games as well. The attitude we hear is my collection just went up by $1,000, right? And so much of that is tied back to digital identity. So digital identity is super important in the video game world, right? To where I mean, honestly, now digital identity is as important as physical identity was, I think, in the previous generation, right? So for them, a lot of times it's not, oh my God, I can sell this and make a profit. It's not really about that. It's really about my value just went up by this amount, right? And I think as you blend those things together, it really makes a great experience for consumers. They love it. They feel like they're part of it. The fact that the community has this open economy that they're pricing based on what they think. Now that price could change if the sentiment of the community changes, but what we see is that it really drives that digital identity concept, which again, even games like Call of Duty and Roblox and Fortnite, digital identity is very, very important to the ecosystem.
Yeah, but in those games, they can't take those in-game assets or even sell them, right? But in
That's
your
right.
games, you can.
Yeah, and again, it's great for consumers. We have a lot of them that sell, and I think what you also see out of this is you start seeing a lot of different cohorts kind of coming together, right? You do see some people that are trying to speculate on a card, right? That's a very small piece of the audience. But what's great is they're doing that. A player that's just playing is able to benefit from these different relationships. So I think that's one of the exciting things about Web3 is it's bringing a lot of new cohorts together, right? So you have kind of the whales we've always had in games. We have the casual player. We have the collectors. They're all being able to interact and create a new ecosystem together and do it in a pretty transparent way.
Are you tired of clunky onboarding processes killing your dApp's user growth? Let me introduce you to Passkeys Wallet, enabling one-click Web3 onboarding. Built by Exodus and backed by 9 years of wallet expertise, Passkeys integrates seamlessly into your platform with just a few lines of code and can reduce churn and empower new users to start transacting without leaving your platform. Exodus's developer-friendly toolkit empowers users to create and fund their own wallets directly within your platform. No more drop-off at critical moments, no more seed phrases, extensions, or complicated registration flows. Users simply log in with biometrics for a smooth, secure experience, helping builders retain users and boost engagement. Be among the first to experience the future of crypto. Access Passkeys at passkeys.foundation for more. When it comes to the users and gamers on the games that you have today, the NFL one, the Nitron one, are they Web3 audiences, or they're more just traditional gamers who happen to find this game and now are playing it and learning about maybe blockchain technology without even realizing they're learning about it?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely kind of a new audience, and I think that's also one of the exciting things. Everybody talks about onboarding the next billion users. I'm very, very confident that's coming from gaming. And the reason is that a lot of these concepts are new, right? They come in to play a game, they get a temporary wallet automatically. They can start interacting with very little friction, and then they kind of discover like, wait, what is this wallet thing? I can create a wallet. Oh, that's cool. Now I'm creating value, and now I have a wallet. I can participate in the marketplace. And I think that's going to keep going, right? So what we've been a little surprised at, we knew we were building a game for kind of a traditional gaming audience, but I think we've seen about 20% of all players. And that's very, very high, because you got to remember, most mobile games, you lose 50% of the players in 24 hours, right? That's a very common. In fact, if you're only losing 50% in 24 hours, that's a really great sign. So we have very high retention in NFL. but you still lose, 30 to 40, 50% of the players in the first 24 hours. So the fact that 20% overall have gotten to a point that they've created a permanent wallet. So a lot of times it is onboarding new people. It's kind of educating them along the way through usage rather than through just pure education. Like, hey, go to a crypto exchange, and buy
Mm-hmm.
this thing and sign up for KYC. You kind of naturally lead them to where they want to go based on what their maybe ambition is.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think also just doing things opposed to like reading about it is so much more engaging and easy to understand. Like you could tell someone how a baseball game works, but just watching it or actually being in it, you would get it way faster than like reading an article.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
And kind of throw them in the deep end a little bit and let them figure it out. But I think we're seeing that. And I think, one of the things we're excited about, we just made a change to, kind of this Polkadot ecosystem through the Mythos chain. So it's backed by kind of the Polkadot relay chain. And that's even allowing us to do even more things now. So I'd say, we've been very much in this kind of Web 2 becoming Web 2.5, right? But I think we're actually going to be able to add some full Web3 functionality to where if you want to have your own wallet completely non-custodial, you'll be able to link that in and use that instead, right? Now, I still think the percentage of people doing that will be pretty low at first. But again, same thing. Our goal is to get from point A to point B is really kind of a gradual increase rather than kind of trying to step up immediately. And I think we'll see that. I think we'll see more people like, oh, wait, I have this wallet I can do this with. We're stepping our toes a little bit into SocialFi, which I'm always working on the crypto terms here, but SocialFi, I guess now is the new thing. And for us, we've been thinking about social gaming and what does that mean and how do we kind of tie into that? And again, what that does is that gives you more utilization around these tokens. So you can sell something in one aspect or one game. You can quick trade now across games. I can suddenly take an NFL asset and maybe exchange it for a Nitro Nation asset or a Pudgy Penguin asset or something like that. But then also you have ways you can participate with the community, and you're using this kind of common utility token to have a lot of different ways to be part of that gaming ecosystem. So we're very excited on that. It's not just about marketplaces. It's really about the entire gaming experience. And I think, like I said, I think we're introducing kind of a new concept later this year that we'll start with NFL Rivals, but ways now that you can interact with this kind of common currency behind the scenes that you're earning and participating in and using it to vote and be governance, but also kind of participation in GameFi, participation in SocialFi. We think there's other uses for it in the future as well.
There's a lot of elements out there that you guys could integrate. You already have. Which of the kind of blockchain technology based applications you find are getting the most traction and use from your gamers? Like, what do they really love? What is something maybe they haven't adapted to yet? Two sides of the spectrum.
I think for us, I mean, the biggest thing that's been exciting. So I think we're the only studio now that's kind of still approved by Apple and Google to really have the secondary fully in the game. And the way we did that was a little different. We're not pushing a token in the game, right? But basically we have a virtual currency in the game, which again is a very common kind of trope of how gamers interact, right? They have these currencies. And then at any time when you spend that currency, it'll automatically do the conversion into a token for you. So things like that have been very powerful for us. It's really been some of the more onboarding type pieces, right? To where I literally just go in, buy an in-app purchase through Apple or Google. I suddenly can participate in the market. And suddenly you start getting this like, oh, that's really interesting. And a lot of people maybe go to the web and there's more functionality on the web and things like that. So I think the biggest thing for us has been this in-game marketplace and the ability to quick trade. So it's very, very natural. It's very built in the game flow. We have our next version of NFL Rivals is coming out very soon here for kind of season 2. A lot of new functionality. There's even things like ticker wires, right? So you can really start seeing that activity of what the trade wire, who's trading what and what's happening there. And I think it adds a level of excitement, showing how alive the community is. We've had millions and millions of trades at this point, and it's great when it makes the game feel alive. It makes the economy feel alive when you're seeing, oh my goodness, why are they trading for Christian McCaffrey? Why are they trading for Patrick Mahomes now? Why is he out of favor or in favor or whatever, right? So again, it's kind of bringing that out, and I think it just makes consumers more and more interested in what else can I do? How else can I participate?
Yeah, but that's kind of like where we are today. So in the early days when people were starting to play these games and everything, how did you kind of educate them on, IP or blockchain technology or this in-game economy that has now like kind of flourished? Like, what does it take to really get them in?
I mean, I think that's one thing we've done a few times now is we've been working with pretty big IPs. And honestly, that's not really a Web3 thing for me. That's really even a Web2 thing, right? Is if you look at gaming, when you're making a decision on a game, there's original IPs. Original IPs are very, very, very difficult to get off the ground, and they're very expensive to do well. You can do one, but to really get something, there's not a lot of new IPs that kind of launch and are successful. So I think that's one thing we've done is we've really partnered with groups like the NFL. We've been talking to other sports leagues. We partnered up with Pudgy Penguins. These are brands that people already kind of know and are interacting with. And I think for that, being able to tell the lore, being able to tell the story behind those brands have made people kind of come in very easily into these economies. So I think that helps a lot. They're harder to get, there are also they're more complicated to make sure all the brand incentives are there. But I think that's really helped us a lot to make sure that we can, it's something, again, I did in my previous company. We did Marvel and Star Wars and Blade Runner and, Magic the Gathering. And that style of game, you can really, you still want to tell kind of a unique angle to that IP. Example, like Blade Runner in my last game, we were doing a Blade Runner VR game when VR was super early, but we wanted to not just tell the story already out there. We wanted to tell through that medium, how do you tell a new story around that IP? Same thing kind of with Web3, right? So we're kind of telling a new story or in an essence of NFL of how do you interact and how do you play together? And oh my goodness, I can earn these items and this means this and this means that. And I think that's important, but I think the big IPs do help. I think you'll see more of that. You'll start seeing some big original IPs. I think there's going to be 2 games in 2025 that are very Web3, that are both built by, I would consider, 2 of the biggest legends of the gaming industry that are coming into the market. They've been working on these games. One's been in development for 3 years on original IP. One's been in development for 7 years. So these are not short timelines to get these games out, but you're going to start seeing more of these kind of come out. And then frankly, like I said, as they build up new IPs, other people will be able to build off of those as well.
Can we get a hint on what those 2 games are or what they entail?
Yeah. I think one's a shooter that is absolutely a stunningly beautiful game. It's from a designer that's he is I think he's one of the most successful game makers in the history of video games, right? So he's stepping very heavily in the space, and he brings a lot of he brings 30 plus years of design acumen to the picture. So I think he's building something that's going to be absolutely remarkable. Another guy, he's probably the most commercially successful game developer or game designer and game developer studio head in history. He's working on a pretty amazing project as well. So I can't say what they are yet, but I think you're seeing a lot of the creativity. I think a lot of these big game designers are now seeing like, wow, you actually can layer this in, and you can actually, that idea of a creator economy, right? Roblox has done well with it. Yeah. Fortnite's done well with it, but everybody's starting to figure out, if we make that open, if we make this economy open and truly kind of hand some of the keys back to the community, you can really take things to a new level. And I think we're starting to see that. We're playing with that. I think it also helps that, frankly, like in NFL, when we started last year at the season opening, secondary revenue, so the revenue we made from trading fees, was about 15% of the entire game, right? So 15% of our revenue came from that. I think last month we were nearly 50%, right? So that's huge. We've almost doubled the opportunity of that game through the secondary economy. And that's a big difference, right? Games can fail by 1 or 2%, let alone seeing there's not a lot of double digit or even 50% or 100% growth opportunities right now in gaming. And I think you're going to see that attract more and more people as we see more examples of that success.
Yeah, I like that you bring that up, and that you also kind of shout out these other, game developers and people who have been successful in the space for so long. And you've been in the space for a while too. So I'm curious your thoughts on how are the other Web3 gaming studios, publishers, etc., approaching this from your point of view? Obviously, like, you're not in the boardroom with them or making the decisions, but when you're looking at other Web3 games that are being put out there, do you think they're doing a good job of creating these games? What do you think is going well versus like, you guys got to get this together?
Yeah, I'll be super honest. I think it's somewhat similar to what we've seen in traditional games for a long time. I think on average, barely 10% of games will succeed. That's just kind of a stat we've seen over the last 2 decades. The difference is that with Web3, the games become more public very early. If you look at a company like a Supercell, right? Or Rovio, right? These guys, they kill probably 80% of their games before anybody even knows about it, right? We've killed games before anybody ever knew about it, right? Like, they don't make it past the internal hurdles and the internal KPIs, even to get known that there's a game in development. Web3 is a little different because they're trying to build a community from the day zero, right?
Of course,
So you hear a lot more about these games. I think a lot of them will fail, right? And it's not a throwing shade at these developers. It's just kind of a natural thing. Games will fail. I think the difference is you hear about them at the beginning rather than hear about them right before they're about to go into an alpha. And I think that's a key difference. We hear about a lot more games in Web3. Though that same amount of games are being built in Web2, you just don't ever hear about them. So I think there could be some backlash that could be a problem, because when you kill any property, right? There's already internal emotions, right? I mean, people that have been working in these games, they're like, oh God, we've been working so hard on this. When you suddenly include the community from day one, I think you're gonna have some heartache. And so I do think we're gonna have a lot of these games will fail, but I think it's gonna be interesting to see, because communities kind of bought in before it even had a chance. So I think there's some problems there. I think a lot of people are still kind of focused on copycatting a little bit, like, hey, let's copycat the design and try and get a token out. I don't think that's the right approach. I think what you're going to start seeing, though, and like I said, we know about several of these games already. You're going to see some games that have literally been in development for years, and they're not publicly known, or they're very lightly publicly known. And I think as those games come out, everybody will be like, oh my God, I think it'll also be another little shift to the Web3 group, because I think there's a lot of the Web3 games aren't really built necessarily by developers that have published a game before. You're going to see a lot like, well, let's just do that. Let's just do what they're doing.
Yeah,
and the reality will set in. Like, they've spent 7 years building this game, right? This is not just let's throw this out in a few months and tell the community we're going to do this in a few months. There's a lot of planning involved. So my take right now, I think Web3, I think there's some great examples out there that are going to do well. I think there'll be new developers that do emerge. I think it'll be somewhat rare, just because it's tough to make these games. But I do think there's some great groups out there, and I think I'd say there's probably even more right now in kind of Asia. Asia's really embracing this a little bit more. I think there's some great games. I mean, if you look at like a FSL that did Steppen, they're sitting on millions and millions of players as well, which is exciting. You have groups like WeMix and Square Enix. They've all been looking at it, but you'll see some, there'll be some trials and tribulations as it comes out. So we'll see a lot happen. But I do worry a little bit about that consumer sentiment, because they're being exposed to these games that normally they would never see the light of day. Right. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah. I mean, I think copying things is the greatest form of flattery, and usually the copycats tend to not do as well as the originals. On some occasions, you do see them succeed better. They take it and move on. Yeah.
Fortnite was not an original concept. But they made it into one of the greatest successes in the history of video games, right? And I mean, I don't know if a lot of people know that, but Fortnite barely made it out, right? Because it was based on a different model, right? It was a completely different gameplay. And they tested it. They did kind of bring it out. They were going to shut it down. And then frankly, they adopted the battle royale that was coming from H1Z1 and from PUBG and things like that. And they made it work. So again, it's not always as planned. And even some of the biggest games in the world are not as planned. They just kind of happen. But it'll be interesting to watch. Yeah.
All right. Maybe you're right. I'll be wrong on some of them, and some I'll be right. It depends on the games.
I mean, some of the copycat, honestly, some of them are great. Some of them will. Well, it's going to be fun and exciting. But I have even seen from token investors, right? People that are buying into these tokens. There's a lot of like, oh man, the token's down, and I'm like, you probably shouldn't have ever been exposed to that in the first place. But so there's going to have to be some appetite for that. Like, hey, if you bet that early, if you are building behind that early, there is going to be some failure, and people have to think about that.
Yeah. So. This podcast is sponsored by Galaxy. If you're immersed in the world of Web3, Galaxy is a name you need to know. As a decentralized super app with an impressive 21 million users boasting over 100 million monthly transactions, Galaxy is elevating its impact with Gravity, the magnet chain for Web3. Gravity is designed for full chain abstraction, zero knowledge proof based privacy, and rapid transaction speeds, all coming together to offer an unparalleled user experience. Gravity opens the door for developers to effortlessly build on the largest on-chain distribution platform, and for users, it promises an even smoother, more secure journey through Web3. It's not about being on-chain, it's about being on the right chain every single time. Galaxy is on a mission to onboard the world to Web3, and Gravity is the magnetic force that will propel the vision forward. Ready to launch your Web3 journey? Build the future on Gravity. Visit gravity.xyz for more information. Yeah, I want to shift gears a little bit. We talked a lot about the NFL game, the Nitron game a bit, but you also have the Pudgy Penguins one that is coming out. There was an announcement about that. What was the decision behind that? That's very different from the other two games. When can we expect it to roll out? There's a community there. There's a very big community there.
There is a community there.
And so it's different.
Too. Yeah, it's different. And I think, honestly, Pudgy for me, I've been following a lot of the Web3 brands. We've talked to, the Yuga guys over the years. We've talked to a lot of these projects out there. And there's some great ones, Dead Fellas and Cool Cats. So there's been a lot of these out there. I think fundamentally they're great communities, but they still haven't hit quite a mass, breakout success at a mass level, except for Pudgy. I think Pudgy, as I've been calling it, I did a talk earlier, they're kind of a triple threat already. And I think our goal is to help them become a quadruple threat, right? So they've been a threat in NFT sales, right? I mean, they've done nearly $500 million of secondary sales. That in and of itself is amazing. It's one of the few projects that has sustained. I mean, Luca and team are absolutely brilliant on what they've done and how they've done it and how they've implemented it. And then they added retail, right? And that's obviously
with
Luca's
the toys,
specialty.
right?
Yeah, the toys, the plushies, they have a lot of new ideas I think they're going to be doing. And the fact that they've been able to bridge a retail off of that kind of digital asset is the way they've done it is amazing, right? So they're giving value to the digital asset. They're giving a modern opportunity that they have expertise in on how to drive that. They sold millions of toys at this point. The social is also amazing. And this is, again, that genius of Luca is, I mean, I don't know if you know the Giphy app, right? But I think they're over 20 billion views.
That's crazy.
Via gifts. And what's amazing about that, I mean, that's more than Disney has, right? And so they've suddenly unlocked this social component as well. And they're building this a beautiful brand off of that. Now they've had some other game pieces out there and they have, they'll continue, I'm sure, to do some other ones, but we latched onto that very quickly. And we've talked to Luca over the last, I mean, it's been a while and really said, this deserves, we should do a AAA game. We should do a real game that we could possibly bring out to 100 million people, to extend that brand that they're already building. And also, how do we tie in all the other components that they've done really well? So we're working through that with them. It's still, fairly early. There'll be some big announcements soon. I think the game has a title now, which is great. We'll be sharing that before too long. But we just want to do justice to what Luca's built and extend that IP. And I think it just makes for amazing gameplay. I mean, even the community, how they built that community, the whole huddles, they call it huddles, and the community coming together. You got to think about how does the community interact and how do we kind of extend that into gameplay? So we're working through it with them. There'll be a bunch of announcements. It's not really my place to make announcements quite yet without them, but you'll see some more very soon here. And I think it's going to be a very, very fun, very cool game.
I guess on that front, I know you can't say too much, but what can we expect from the game? Will it be more playful or will it's not going to be like a shooter game? Of course not. Like we've already talked about. And then also like what type of like Pudgy Penguins IP will be brought into the game? Will it be like the flagship characters or will it be like NFT holders who can offer up their IP? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I got to be careful. I don't want to reveal too much yet, but I would say that a lot of that's being considered. I think there's definitely consideration of how do we really embrace the community. And so what I would say is that we've really done a lot of time with them on really working around the community they've already started, right? And really the goal of this is we're not necessarily building a game just for the community. We're not just building a brand new game, not for the community, right? It's really how do we help them take that community to an order of magnitude, right? And again, they've already done this in a lot of ways, which is amazing. We think we can take it to a new angle, right? So they're nailing retail. I think they're going to keep nailing retail. They're figuring out social in a huge way. And our goal is how do we basically open that up to the world of gaming? And I think there's a lot of overlap, which is great. But no, I'd say I can't really reveal the gameplay yet. It's definitely more kind of party mode type stuff, So fun gameplay, co-op, competitive, things like that. But it's really about kind of building around what they've started. So again, it's a fun project. It's really great. The team over there, like I said, I think they're the best team in all of Web3 in terms of how they think, and they're marketing masterminds. And I think that's such a great thing to go into as a partnership to kind of take what we're best at, take what they're best at, and see what we can do together. But I think we are lending against it. I can't reveal too much yet, but it'll be a fun gameplay. Really driven for the community and extending the community.
Amazing. We're going to have you and Luca back on when it launches and definitely fits the branding and everything. Yeah, last major question for you, John, is where do you expect Web3 gaming to go in, let's say, the next 6 months to 18 months? That's a fair amount of time in crypto.
That's a forever, it seems like, in Web3. Right. A couple things. I think, like I said, we're now seeing games in the 4 to 5 million range. We're not the only one.
Hmm.
Steppen, I think, is in that range as well. Axie was kind of in that range. I'm not sure where they're at right now. We're starting to see games in that range. I think we'll start seeing games in the 10 to 20 million player range very quickly. I think we could possibly even see a game hit 50 to 100 million players before too long. So we have some things in the works here we're excited about. Obviously, we're working to bring Blankos back into mobile. We have the Pudgy game. We have the NFL new season. We think we can double the size of that community this year. So we're very excited about where that goes. We're looking at bringing on a lot of other third parties. That's been obviously a goal of ours, is to kind of turn what we built for our games into a full platform. It's been the design from the beginning. And I think you'll see a lot of that coming soon. There's probably 4 or 5 pretty major games. I'd say one of the games we're talking to right now has been around for years, right? So it's actually been around for about 5 years, but they still, after 5 years, have nearly 1 million players a day in that game. And it's kind of introducing that concept of how do we kind of extend that game with these new concepts. So I think we're going to start seeing millions of players a day. I think 18 months from now, I think we'll see 10 million plus players a day in these games. So we're going to definitely see kind of this breakout usage. We're going to see a couple really amazing new games. I can name at least 4 or 5 games that I think are going to be the games we've been talking about forever, right? Big game designers, proven game designers, proven. I mean, just the quality of production is through the roof. We're going to see those start to hit the market. I think early 2025, we'll see at least 2 of those start hitting alpha. And it's going to be amazing. It's going to be really fun to see where we take it. And I think from there, what's exciting is then we can start thinking about the next piece, right? So how do we truly enable that creator economy, right? It's
Hmm.
hard to build a creator economy without an economy, right? Like, the creators come when there's an economy. And I think once we establish a lot of these economies, we're going to really see some innovation around creator economies. I think we're going to see a lot of innovation around social gameplay. How do people come together? How do they find these games? How do they play together in these games? How do they create together? And I think we'll see other concepts come out, like digital supply chain, right? And it's going to be fun. It's things I've talked about. I've been very passionate about for a while around how do you enable somebody to do this, and somebody else can take that and build something even bigger, and everybody gets their contribution, right? And I think we're seeing this in AI right now, right? AI, there's a lot of people upset because AI is kind of ripping their stuff off, and I
Right.
think blockchain can actually solve that. And I think blockchain gaming is going to prove a model to say, hey, I can build a widget, and then somebody else can take my widget and build something bigger widget, right? And I'm still, because of the chain, I'm still getting my piece of the contribution. And I think that's really important. And I think, frankly, it might even wake up some of the AI models a little bit to say, oh shit, like this is actually can work. You can
Hmm.
actually track and make sure everybody in that creator economy is compensated for that. And I think those type of ideas, again, we're so close to seeing that happen. It's going to spur 100 other ideas. So we're at that point now that we've kind of figured out all the foundational pieces. We're seeing what's working to drive that audience into these games. We're seeing creators come in and build real awesome new worlds and extend existing IPs into new worlds. And once those things are out there, we'll see just the next level of innovation truly hit.
Hmm.
And that's when things get really fun.
You're so passionate. You've got me like all hyped up about this too, John. I feel like
It's fun.
yeah, there's like, there's stages to this, right? Like you get the
There it
users
is.
first, and then you add on like more things, like you mentioned, like the assets and everything, and like really build out these economies. And then it's kind of like whatever comes next after that is also
Yeah.
a proliferation of everything, you know?
And what's amazing is I've been around since the beginning of mobile, right?
Right.
And really been in development since the mobile started. In the early mobile days, if you look back at the early iPhone apps and the early iPhone games, I mean, they're kind of pathetic compared to what we have now, right? And it's pathetic in a couple ways. One, it's the gameplay of the newer games, the Genshin Impact or Genshin Impact, Marvel Call of Duty Mobile. Those are like night and day from the beer drinking app. I don't know if you remember that one, where
Of
you kind of
course. Yeah.
like beer. But even things like Doodle Jump,
Or
or
like
the
Flappy
early
Bird. Yeah.
games, Tap Tap Nation, or what it was called, Flappy Bird.
Hmm.
So we're definitely have involved a lot from there. But the other things I find too are interesting is even more of the casual games, right? You take a bingo game or you take a match 3 game,
Hmm.
the level of quality now that everything is moving, everything, and
Right.
that's science behind that in terms of constant rewards, right? You feel that progression, you feel the excitement that I just won. That wasn't in the 1.0 games,
Yeah.
right? And now every game is pretty much doing that. It's just kind of natural to have a lot of movement, a lot of bells and whistles going off, and audio hitting, and all that stuff hitting now. And that's just an evolution. And we're kind of getting into that phase, I think, of the Web3 world, to where once you do it, you won't turn back. You'll look back at 1.0 and be like, really? That's what we were doing back then. And I think, but it's not necessarily just production value, because that's just natural. Game developers are great at that. They're able to squeeze a lot more production out of the existing hardware and opportunities. But it's also the mechanics. And I think that's where it gets exciting. As I mentioned, like, as we start thinking about digital supply chain and creator economy, it's going to be mind blowing in terms of like, wow, that was really cool. And we didn't see that in the first 5 years. But now it's kind of par for the course, right? And so we're so close. We're so close, I think, to seeing that as an industry.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited for that as well. Last major question for you, John. Ask all my guests this. Can you leave us with a piece of advice, maybe something you've carried with you throughout your time in Web3 gaming world?
Yeah, that's great. I would say that the biggest piece of advice that we've seen is gaming. For us, we're a little lucky because the Web2 gaming can be a little bit more steady. So there's not this kind of ebb and flow, such dramatic ebb and flow that you see in the Web3 world. And I think for us, we get a lot of people. I'll be on calls with investors or with token funds or with whatever, right? And as we're talking through it, they'll be like very depressed one day, and they're like, "Yeah, market's down." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess you're right." We don't really see that as much because we're really focused on, gaming is a little bit more steady, right? And it's really, it doesn't have those kind of ebbs and flows, the rapid ebbs and flows that Web3 has. So I think for me, the advice is make sure you don't pay attention to that too much. Obviously you always want things, you want things up and to the right, but the ebbs and flows can really drain people. And I think you gotta kind of pull back from that a little bit. Really focus on the long-term goal. Don't focus on the short-term, what happens in the next hour in these economies. I think it's really kind of making sure you're constantly planning for sustainability, right? So to me, that's the biggest thing. I see it all the time. I say, oh, well, we can't launch a token because the market. I'm like, just focus on your game, build a better game, because that's what's going to drive it. So that'd be my advice, is you got to think a little longer out. Don't let the short term kind of affect you too much.
Yeah. Don't tether everything to a token.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a pleasure to have you, and we'll have to do this again.
I'd love to. We'll definitely do a follow-up here. So thank you so much. So thanks for having me. And yeah, great questions, by the way.
Thanks.